72 hours. That is all the distance Claressa Shields had between her and the moment her entire self-built myth got dragged into the spotlight of somebody else's coronation. And from the look of what just spilled across Instagram, she did not survive the countdown. The woman who was 2 breaths away from being crowned the undisputed face of women's boxing in the modern era just spent an entire evening reposting old dates with a married man, recycling press conference footage nobody asked to see again, and aiming sideways jabs at a fighter who never even said her name in anger. Everything she had been quietly building for the past decade. The Olympic pedigree, the undefeated record, the promotional machinery, the documentary, the record label fantasy, the Flint to global superstar redemption arc. All of it is standing on the edge of a cliff, and she keeps wiggling her own toes over the drop zone like she wants to see how far the fall actually is. Strip this down to the bone and examine what is underneath, because the surface version of the story is already embarrassing enough to make your entire group chat light up. Friday night, Madison Square Garden. That is the sentence that should terrify any female boxer not named on the card. Madison Square Garden is not a regional fight night, not a hometown catchweight spectacle, not a boutique event stitched together by a promoter who needs a social media bump. Madison Square Garden is the cathedral. It is the mountaintop the entire sport points its compass toward. And when most valuable promotions stitch together a $100 million partnership with ESPN, the first marquee detonation of that partnership was set to be headlined by Alycia Baumgardner and co-starred by Shadasia Green. Not Claressa, not the self-appointed GWOAT, not the woman who spent a year convincing a section of the internet that her brand and her sport were essentially the same logo. The message was surgical. The message was loud. The message was final. The future is being delivered to somebody else's doorstep, and the person holding the keys is not wearing a Peacock documentary crown. So what did Claressa do with a slap that's subtle and that public? What any performer does when the stage lights swing away from their face for the first time in years. She started performing for shadows. She started rewriting the timeline. She started reposting a November awards night photograph with Papoose and trying to sell it to a skeptical internet as proof of an ongoing adult world romance. In a house of cards constructed entirely from bravado and clipped-up old press conferences, November became April, a one-off red carpet walk became a regular date night, and an obviously choreographed outing got repackaged as private intimacy. The whole thing reeked of a PR department that does not actually exist, trying to rebuild a narrative nobody in her target demographic is buying. And if you have to reach 4 months into your camera roll to dig up proof that a man who is not your husband likes being seen with you, the conclusion is not proof of love. The conclusion is a scrapbook of desperation. The collision that triggered this meltdown was not even a direct attack on Claressa. That is the absurd part. That is the part that seals exactly what kind of psychology we are dealing with. The ignition came from a press conference exchange that had nothing to do with her personal life, nothing to do with her husband's situation, nothing to do with her so-called music career. Alycia Baumgardner, who is one of the most skillful boxer punchers in the lightweight and super featherweight conversation on the planet, stood at the podium, spoke with the clarity of someone who actually lives in the pocket of her sport, and delivered a line that should have been filed under routine trash talk diplomacy. She looked directly into the camera, referenced Claressa, and said something to the effect of, "I respect the Olympic champion. I need dance partners, but I back myself, and the United Kingdom is where the big fights live right now." Then she added that she would cross oceans for the right purse, but the UK energy is where her moment has crystallized. That was it. That was the whole thing. A professional, measured, almost complimentary boxer-to-boxer statement, delivered from inside the tornado of a fight week promotional cycle that is not about Claressa in any direction. And watch what the response was. Claressa did not send a camp answer. Claressa did not politely cite the challenge and let it breathe for a week while the Madison Square Garden card did its work. Claressa went into her Instagram stories and reposted the clip with the kind of desperate circularity that every single person who has ever watched a meltdown in slow motion recognizes immediately. The goal was not to accept a fight. The goal was not to celebrate a rival's ambition. The goal was to yank the oxygen out of the room and force the conversation back toward her own face. She reposted a rival's press moment so she could feel relevant inside of it. Pause on that. Stretch that image out. This is what the face of a sport is supposed to do with a challenge? Steal the clip, not the challenge. Hijack the moment, not the opportunity. Meanwhile, most valuable promotions, the organization running the actual gates, the actual gloves, the actual future, rolled out a single photograph the same evening that detonated across every combat sports feed on the planet. Ronda Rousey, Amanda Serrano, Alycia Baumgardner, Gina Carano. For women, for different combat backgrounds. One unified message in a single frame. This is what the next era of the sport looks like when it is built on camaraderie instead of chaos, on mutual respect instead of insult economies, on professional-grade promotion instead of whatever toxic Twitter sludge Salida and winning records have been pumping into the bloodstream of women's boxing for the past 2 years. Sit with that image. That image is a coronation. That image is also a eulogy. A coronation for the new face. A eulogy for whoever failed to grow into the role when it was literally being handed to her on a velvet pillow. Now right here is where the entire story rotates and reveals its real mechanism. Because the question nobody in the comments section is asking loud enough is, how did Claressa lose a seat at that table? She had the resume. She had the Olympic gold squared. She had the undefeated ledger. She had the crossover documentary. She had the mainstream media Rolodex. She had, for a short, beautiful window, every single ingredient that a sport desperate for a crossover superstar normally has to manufacture from scratch. And she set all of it on fire inside the span of a calendar year, chasing a married man around airports, crashing out at other fighters in her stories, fabricating beef with rappers' wives, picking fights with fans who asked normal questions, and insisting on her own name as the only relevant name in the room whenever any other female boxer dared to have a headline. The people in charge of the next decade of this sport watched her do it. They took notes. They quietly closed the door. And when $100 million walked in through ESPN's side entrance looking for a face, they did not hand that face to the person still arguing on social media about whether a group date counted as a romantic date. Rewind the clock, because the receipts on this timeline are not subtle. Back when the winning records circus rolled into the UK a few months ago, Claressa flew across the Atlantic to what should have been 2 different women's boxing moments. Caroline Dubois had her platform. The other UK headliners had their platform. Claressa inserted herself into both of them, commandeered the press microphones, and spent the weekend manufacturing controversy instead of celebrating the sport. That is pattern number 1. The UK sabotage template. When somebody else had the spotlight, the brand called Claressa showed up to try to eat it. When Shadasia Green was earning her way onto a Madison Square Garden marquee, the brand called Claressa reposted a Papoose picture. When Alycia Baumgardner was one news cycle away from being handed the crown, the brand called Claressa started reheating last July content and labeling it proof of originality. Pattern, pattern, pattern. Once is chaos, twice is coincidence, 3 times is architecture. And here is the collision that makes the architecture impossible to ignore. Claressa has spent this week screaming about other fighters copying her energy, accusing younger women in the sport of stealing her playbook, insisting that her old weigh-ins from last summer are the unauthorized template for the fights that are happening now. The pot labeling the kettle is an understatement. This is the pot turning on the broiler, lighting the gas, and accusing the entire kitchen of arson. Everyone with a functioning memory knows that Claressa's brand has been a patchwork quilt of other women's ideas for years. She attaches herself to a peer, absorbs their tone, adopts their catchphrases, drafts off their promotional energy, and then a few months later acts as if the template was hers from inception. Her pattern is not authenticity. Her pattern is absorption. And when you run an absorption strategy for long enough, eventually the real originators stop inviting you to dinner, and then you have to sit outside the window and repost the photo of the meal you were almost served. Then there is the Papoose factor, which is the single most toxic ingredient in the entire brand smoothie right now. And the factor she most refuses to acknowledge is actively dismantling her sports legacy. Let the layers peel back, because every single layer has a fingerprint. Remember when Maserati went on the record and reported that Papoose helped pick out everything inside Claressa's Atlanta home? Remember the specificity of that account, the furniture choices, the decor, the deeply intimate domestic details that you only share with a partner who has been emotionally embedded in your daily life for months or years. Remember what happened after that account detonated? Papoose has not been seen in Atlanta since. Not for a birthday. Not for a holiday. Not for a drop-by visit. Not for a corner store run. Not once. The man who supposedly selected to throw pillows in her primary residence has been geographically allergic to the city those pillows sit in for an unbroken stretch that any honest observer can chart on a calendar. That is not a romance. That is an exposure event followed by a retreat formation. So what does Claressa do? She flies to New York. Monthly. Consistently. The same city where Papoose actually lives. The same city where his actual wife Remy Ma actually lives. The same city where the gossip ecosystem actually watches. Every visit stitched together another layer of denial, another posted photograph, another we are organic moment that fooled exactly the portion of the internet that was already determined to believe her. But when the awards night photograph from November got dragged back to the surface this week and relabeled as a proof point, the seams finally split. Because a November red carpet picture is not a Wednesday night bowl of pasta. A post-industry event is not the same as a man choosing to live in your general vicinity. And a sideways attempt to frame a group outing as a private date of two reads exactly like the Bachelor franchise, where 6 other adults sit at the same table while the camera pretends the couple is alone. Except on television, nobody insults the audience's intelligence by calling it intimacy. Claressa, on the other hand, is standing at the podium of her own brand and insisting a group project counts as a duet. And the thing is, some portion of the audience is still applauding. That is the sociology that deserves its own dissertation. Some percentage of her remaining fan base is either actively endorsing an adulterous dynamic, actively rooting against Remy Ma for reasons that have nothing to do with boxing, or actively cheering the car crash because car crashes are entertaining. None of those positions are flattering to the person trying to be the face of a billion-dollar sport. Imagine the global executives at ESPN sitting in a boardroom looking at the spreadsheet of potential marketable faces for their $100 million women's boxing push, and imagine them having to weigh, in their own internal risk column, whether to invest in an athlete whose personal life is functioning as a public denial machine against a New York rapper's household. Now guess which way the pen moves. Guess which way the dotted line gets signed. Guess who walks into Madison Square Garden on Friday night as the anointed one. And guess who sits at home reposting dusty clips of her own last July weigh-in. Peel back the next layer, because this is the one that actually exposes the true cost of the choices she keeps making. Claressa is not losing a ranking. Claressa is losing a century. When historians write the chapter on the first big money explosion of women's professional boxing, the name they sit at the top of the page is the name that was available, stable, promotable, and still hungry when the networks decided to finally pour cement into the sport. Right now that name is not hers. Right now that name is Alycia Baumgardner. That name is Shadasia Green. That name is Amanda Serrano. That name is the entire new generation of fighters who did not torch their own PR architecture in exchange for the temporary dopamine of trolling somebody else's marriage. Claressa could have been the granite monument. Instead, she is trying to become a meme, and the meme keeps updating without her. Also, and this is where the audio deserves a pause for emphasis, there is the music project. The music project is not working. That has to be said plainly, because the discourse around her brand refuses to say it plainly. The bars are not landing. The release strategy is not moving streaming numbers in any direction that anybody in the actual music industry considers healthy. The features nobody asked for, the aesthetic that cannot decide whether it is Fight Camp Grit or MTV Cribs Fantasy, the sonic identity that borrows from 3 different regional styles without committing to any of them. None of it is converting. A side pivot into rap was supposed to be the second revenue stream that buffered the boxing empire. Instead, it has been a cautionary tale about celebrities underestimating how brutally loyal hip-hop audiences are to craft. And what does an athlete do when the side pivot flops? They retreat to the old trophy case. They repost the old weigh-in. They rerun the old press conference. They flood the timeline with archival content pretending the archive is new. All of which further confirms that the present tense is not giving them anything usable. So the Madison Square Garden weekend becomes a psychological MRI of the woman she has become. Every hour leading up to the opening bell is a test. Can she sit still? Can she let another woman have a moment without hijacking it? Can she resist the urge to fly to the arena uninvited and manufacture a scene for the cameras? Can she resist an Instagram live from a rival hotel lobby? Can she not post a story strategically timed to the main event walkout? The odds of her passing every one of these tests without interference are lower than the odds of a referee stopping a fight on a love tap. And whispered inside combat sports media corners this week is the quiet speculation, and it is not being reported on any major outlet yet, but it is being murmured between producers, that most valuable promotions and ESPN have internally discussed whether to formally restrict her access to the arena on Friday night if her behavior escalates. That is not a rumor spun up from nothing. That is a legitimate corporate concern about whether one athlete's uncontrollable self-interest will sabotage the inaugural headline event of a 9-figure partnership. Pivot to Remy Ma, because the Remy Ma silence is its own separate chapter. Remy Ma has not responded. Remy Ma has not escalated. Remy Ma has not played the social media retaliation game. Remy Ma has let the situation cook itself, which is the single most devastating response a real New York veteran can deploy against somebody who is begging for engagement. Claressa tried to trigger a response by resurrecting one of Remy's former friends to throw jabs. That strategy died on arrival. It did not trend. It did not move the needle. It did not even get the ex-friend a guest podcast spot. Then Papoose himself publicly fumbled the alleged narrative with a misstep that anyone watching the beat for the past 3 months can easily enumerate. And what was Claressa's counter move to the fumble? Another flight to New York. Another posted picture. Another attempt to control a story that she has been losing in real time for months. The Dignity ledger is running in the red, and the accountant is refusing to return her calls. Now examine the dollar signs, because the financial claims have started to drift into questionable territory as well. The $8 million figure she keeps broadcasting for her promotional deal is a number that does not fully square with anything combat sports financial analysts have been able to verify. The $3 million signing bonus is a subset of a total package whose exact structure has never been published, audited, or confirmed by any independent outlet with actual visibility into the books. And that does not automatically mean the claim is false, but it does mean the claim is a thesis, not a receipt. And when you build your entire public persona on the assumption that people will take your dollar figures at face value, while simultaneously refusing to post anything close to a pay stub, a tax return, or a signed contract, the audience is eventually going to do what the audience always does: start asking cost-benefit questions. They are going to compare her reported earnings to the actual main event purses in the sport. They are going to compare her pay-per-view numbers to the buys of the fights that were supposed to elevate her. They are going to compare her promotional leverage to the leverage of the women actually sitting on the MVP promotions roster right now. And the math is not going to flatter her. The math is going to make her brand look inflated, which is the exact opposite of the narrative she has spent years hammering into place. Meanwhile, on the undercard of her own mental economy, there is the larger issue of authorship. Who is actually writing the Claressa Shields story in 2026? It is not Claressa. It is the gossip ecosystem. It is the bloggers, the anonymous tea accounts, the reaction podcasts, the sports-adjacent commentators who have figured out that any content with her face generates a reliable engagement spike regardless of whether the content is flattering. She has become the raw material for other people's monetization funnels. Every story about her makes somebody else a little richer. Every fresh meltdown creates a new piece of thumbnail inventory for a creator who was not on her friendship list yesterday and will not be on it tomorrow. That is the compound interest of chaos. You pay a percentage of your dignity every single time you give the ecosystem a reason to click. And when you volunteer the material for free, as she has done repeatedly, you pay double. Then there is the cultural accounting nobody wants to do out loud. Black women in boxing, in any combat sport, in any sport that sits close to the margin of mainstream media visibility, do not get infinite chances. The window for being the face is narrow. The margin for error is pencil thin. The cost of missing the window is not a graceful pivot into a broadcast seat. It is near invisibility for a decade. Claressa was handed a window so wide you could have driven a moving truck through it. She had producer interest. She had network interest. She had sponsor interest that was sitting there with their pen uncapped, waiting for her to stop typing meltdown stories long enough to sign. And she spent the window arguing about Papoose, fabricating dance partners, antagonizing Remy Ma's silence, and trying to retroactively redefine what the word date means. The shape of the damage is not theoretical. It is measurable in the gap between the career she was promised and the career she is actually running. Zoom out once more, because the broader stakes for women's boxing itself need to be named. This Friday's card is not just a fight card. It is a stress test. It is a data point. It is the single loudest signal the sport has sent to its own audience since the Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor rematches rewrote the financial ceiling. If the Baumgardner headlined event hits its numbers, if Shadasia Green performs on her co-headline moment, if the room feels like a sport rather than a sideshow, then most valuable promotions will have validated its thesis that women's boxing can be promoted on unity, respect, and professional polish rather than on manufactured feuds and personal melodrama. And the person whose brand is most threatened by that validation is the person whose brand has been built on the opposite. Claressa's content model has been adjacent to the winning record's content model: feud first, chaos first, Twitter first. If the MVP ESPN model outperforms the winning records model on the scoreboard, the entire economic gravity of the sport tilts away from her business mode and toward a business mode she does not know how to operate inside of. Which brings us back to the actual psychology of this week's meltdown, because once you understand what is actually threatened, the reposts and the dusty clips start making a different kind of sense. She is not being petty for the sake of pettiness. She is being petty because pettiness is the only place she is left. She cannot suddenly become a craft-first promotional partner overnight. She cannot rebuild a public relationship with a rapper she has not been photographed with in Atlanta in months. She cannot undo the Maserati but exposure. She cannot convince the audience that a November red carpet walk was an April romantic dinner. She cannot make her music numbers climb. She cannot force Remy Ma to engage. She cannot make Papoose fly down for a visit her timeline can verify. She cannot redirect the 13 different narrative rivers that are all currently flowing away from her. All she can do is grab the microphone in her own Instagram story, turn up the volume, and hope the sound overwhelms the information. This is not a strategy. This is a smoke machine. And here is the prediction that is probably going to age well by Saturday morning. Claressa will show up to Friday, in some form, in some proximity. She will either be photographed near the arena, tagged in a story from a hotel bar nearby, or caught on a fan's camera outside the gate wearing an outfit that is slightly too loud for a ticket holder. She will not be able to help herself. The gravitational pull of a spotlight she is not inside of is too strong for a nervous system that has been trained for a decade to seek cameras as a survival mechanism. And the moment she is photographed within the orbit of the Baumgardner green card without being on the card, the narrative will complete its own sentence. It will write itself. It will read, unmistakably, as the dethroned crasher watching the coronation through a locked window. That is not the legacy headline any decorated Olympic fighter wants printed beside their Wikipedia entry. That is the headline of someone who gave their seat at the table away and then stared at the table for the rest of the banquet. Shift the frame to something larger, because the takeaways from this week are not just about one fighter. This is a case study in what happens when an athlete confuses relevance with celebrity. Relevance is what you earn inside the sport by being the best available version of yourself on the biggest available stage. Celebrity is the byproduct of relevance. It is downstream of the work. The mistake Claressa keeps making, and not just her, the mistake a lot of modern athletes keep making, is attempting to reverse engineer the equation. She has been trying to manufacture celebrity first and assume relevance will catch up. But the sport does not work that way. The sport is a harsh, unsentimental, pedigree-first meritocracy where the scoreboard is the final referee. And when the scoreboard rings in favor of a rival whose personal life was not a circus, the celebrity bridge she was trying to build collapses because the relevance pylons underneath it were never built. Pivot one more time, because there is a chapter about audience that deserves its own breath. The audience for women's boxing in 2026 is not the same audience that watched Ann Wolfe in the early 2000s, or Christy Martin in the 90s, or Layla Ali in the 2010s. This audience is younger, smarter, more parasocially sophisticated, more brand literate, and, critically, more willing to publicly revise its allegiances when an athlete's offering conduct no longer matches their in-ring resume. This audience knows what cognitive dissonance tastes like, and they refuse to swallow it for any celebrity who demands they ignore the fact pattern. The Papoose situation is a fact pattern. The repeated meltdowns are a fact pattern. The contradictory timeline posts are a fact pattern. The absence of the man from her actual city for months on end is a fact pattern. And modern audiences aggregate fact patterns the way accountants aggregate receipts at quarter end. When the audit hits publicly. The audit is hitting right now. And the audit is not even the worst part. The worst part is what the audit does to future opportunities. Every brand deal that flirts with signing her now has to sit in a conference room and run the risk calculation. Every network that considers her for a commentary role has to ask whether her off-camera conduct will force an awkward HR moment in the middle of a contract cycle. Every fellow female boxer who might have once considered a mutually beneficial crossover event has to weigh whether partnering with her will pull them into a domain of noise they do not want. The doors do not slam shut overnight. The doors just quietly stop opening. And one day you wake up and realize your calendar has more therapy appointments than it has business meetings, because the business pipeline you thought was unstoppable politely rerouted around you while you were busy reposting a 4-month-old awards photograph. There is also the generational comparison that hovers over this entire situation like a thunderhead. Look at how Ronda Rousey handled the transition from dominant athlete to media figure. Look at how Amanda Serrano handled the transition from fighter to movement leader. Look at how even Gina Carano, whose own public life has been a wild fluctuation, still manages to show up and frame beside other women in combat sports and signal solidarity rather than sabotage. These are models. These are templates. These are available playbooks. The choice to reject every single one of those playbooks in favor of the screaming meltdown model is a deliberate choice, regardless of how Claressa tries to frame it as authenticity. Authenticity is not a shield for a pattern of behavior that is actively detonating your own opportunities. Authenticity is not a euphemism for wanting the rules of the industry to personally rewrite themselves around your emotional appetite. The night before Madison Square Garden now sits on the calendar like a gauntlet. The weigh-in is today. The press moments are cresting. The last pre-fight interviews are being recorded. Alycia Baumgardner is about to do what championship-caliber fighters do in the final 36 hours. Vanish into the pre-fight quiet. Trust the camp. Trust the weight. Trust the body. And let the work walk her into the ring. Shadasia Green is doing the same. The professionals are going quiet. The professionals always go quiet in the final stretch. Silence is the most expensive currency in combat sports the night before a title fight, because silence means the athlete has stopped thinking about noise and started thinking about the opponent in front of them. And while the professionals are going quiet, somewhere else a woman is refreshing Instagram, crafting a new story, stretching a new caption, rehearsing the exact angle of the next content drop that will try, probably in vain, to reroute the story back to her name. What is the actual exit ramp from a spiral like this? It exists. It is narrow. It is uncomfortable, but it exists. The exit ramp starts with a 30-day disappearance. It starts with a full social media blackout. It starts with letting Alycia Baumgardner have Friday night without a single syllable of interference. It starts with letting Shadasia Green have her moment without a single co-star repost. It starts with a return to the gym, camera-free, where somebody who used to be a world-class athlete remembers she was a world-class athlete before she was a storyline. It starts with a quiet phone call to a qualified sports publicist, not a hype man, not a street team amplifier, a real publicist, who can triage the damage and rebuild a roadmap. It starts with the hardest sentence in any adult life, which is the sentence that says, "I was wrong, I overextended, I mistook my worst instincts for my signature, and I am going to stop feeding those instincts." That sentence is available to her. It will probably not be uttered, but it is available. The likelier outcome, and this is the prediction that the data keeps pointing toward, is an escalation pattern. She shows up at or near the arena. She posts from a proximity location. She either engineers or stumbles into a confrontation that gets clipped. The clip goes viral for the wrong reasons. The sport condemns it in whispers, but amplifies it in clicks. A 48-hour news cycle treats her like she is back at the center of the conversation, which she will interpret as vindication. Then the real damage arrives the following week, when the MVP Promotions ESPN audit quietly adds her to the informal do not invite list for the next 3 card cycles. The exclusion will not be announced. It will just be observed. Her name will simply not appear where it used to routinely appear. And the slow erasure from the calendar will be the most effective punishment the industry has ever handed down, because it will be unanswerable. You cannot fight a door that was never shown to you. Meanwhile, the sport itself keeps moving forward. Women's boxing in 2026 is going to have its biggest commercial year in history regardless of whether Claressa participates in its ascent or sits outside its gates. Baumgardner is going to cash her biggest checks. Serrano is going to solidify her status as the North Star of the division. Shadasia Green is going to stack a resume that by 2028 will rival the top 5 women's resumes of all time. New names are going to enter. New storylines are going to surface. New signature performances are going to crystallize. The train is not waiting. The train was never waiting. And the person watching the train from the platform does not get to retroactively claim they were the conductor. So let the reckoning sit where it is supposed to sit. The coronation is happening Friday. It is happening at Madison Square Garden. It is happening under ESPN's lights with Most Valuable Promotions logo on every piece of branded infrastructure. The face of women's boxing in the modern era is being handed over through the ceremony of a main event walkout, and the person receiving the crown is not the Olympic gold medalist who spent the last 12 months yelling at strangers on the internet. The person receiving the crown is the one who walked into a press conference, talked about the craft, named her respect, named her confidence, named the sport she actually lives inside, and then silently walked out to go do the work. That is what a face looks like. That is what the next decade looks like. That is what the scoreboard is going to record. And somewhere on a timeline that was once going to be filled with her name, Claressa Shields is going to keep posting. She is going to keep reposting. She is going to keep stitching November photographs onto April feeds. She is going to keep picking fights with silence because silence is the only opponent she cannot hear booing her. She is going to keep insisting on her relevance while the engine that generates relevance leaves her parking lot in the rearview mirror. And one morning, probably sooner than she expects, she is going to open her analytics dashboard and realize the numbers have quietly moved on. The comments have thinned. The reaches have flattened. The impressions are drifting. The empire she built on screaming at the camera has been outlasted by an industry that finally learned how to turn the volume down on her. If there is a final lesson buried inside this entire week, it is the oldest lesson combat sports ever teaches anyone who gets close enough to hear it. You can outwork almost any opponent. You can outslick almost any game plan. You can survive almost any in-ring deficit if your engine is big enough and your heart is willing enough. But you cannot outpunch a pattern of self-sabotage. The opponent that lives inside the mirror has a reach nobody else in the division can match, and every single round you spend pretending that opponent does not exist is a round you lose. The ring is going to be lit up on Friday night. The walkouts are going to crescendo. The anthems are going to play. The punches are going to land. The verdicts are going to be rendered. And somewhere in the shadows of her own timeline, a fighter who could have been the permanent name on the permanent marquee is going to be throwing at ghosts, because the real opponent is the one she refuses to fight. Back to the here and now, because the breaking news of this week demands one more sweep through the lens before we seal the chapter. Alycia Baumgardner is scheduled to weigh in today. Shadasia Green is scheduled to weigh in today. The promotional rollout is cresting. The pay-per-view numbers are being forecast. The broadcast run of show is being finalized. The weigh-in stage is going to feature a pair of women who understand that the stage belongs to the sport, and the sport is going to reward them for that understanding. The camera is going to catch expressions, gestures, eye contact. The internet is going to screenshot all of it. And for the next 48 hours, the dominant image of women's boxing is not going to be Claressa. It is going to be everybody else. There is a particular kind of silence that follows a fighter home the night they realize the coronation passed them. It is not dramatic. It is not movie silence. It is the silence of a phone that used to buzz constantly and now does not. It is the silence of group chats that used to loop you in and now loop around you. It is the silence of a text thread where your messages go unread for 3 days, then 4, then a week. That silence is the only referee that matters in a career like this, and the referee has already started counting. When the last bell rings on Friday night, when the gloves come off, when the announcers hand the microphone to the winner of the main event, the new era of women's boxing will officially be open. The keys will be handed to a woman who earned them with craft, discipline, timing, and the rare professional restraint to not burn her own house down for attention. The old era, the feud first era, the crash out era, the Twitter tantrum era, the husband-stealing narrative era, the fake date era, will officially be archived. And somebody is going to have to explain to the archivist, 10 years from now, how a fighter with an Olympic gold, a defining record, and a once-in-a-generation platform managed to volunteer herself into the margins of her own sport. The archivist will probably just write one line. Something like, "She wanted to be the face of mistresses more than she wanted to be the face of fighters. Then she got exactly what she wanted. Then she realized exactly what she had lost. And nobody in the arena heard the sound, because the arena was already cheering for somebody else." That is the anatomy of a self-inflicted exit from the very throne that was being built for you. That is the autopsy of a coronation that went to the woman who did not beg for it. That is the receipt for every post, every repost, every res hair, every time to distract story, every group date disguised as duet picture, every crashed-out response to a press conference compliment. The receipts are final. The receipts are already printed. The receipts are sitting on the desk of a sport that has decided, in clear corporate ink, to write its next chapter without the name of the woman who once insisted she was the only chapter worth reading. Madison Square Garden on Friday is the cover page. The interior of the book has already been typeset. The dedication is not for her. The acknowledgments are not for her. The foreword is not for her. The only place her name appears in this volume is in the footnote. The footnote that explains why the woman who was almost the face became the cautionary tale instead. And somewhere in a parallel fight card universe, there is a version of this story where she read the room, dialed back the noise, let somebody else have a moment, and walked into 2027 as a senior stateswoman of a sport that owed her a statue. That version of the story is not the version we got. The version we got is the one she chose, one repost at a time, one story at a time, one flight to New York at a time, until the version became unchangeable. And now, with the clock ticking down toward the biggest women's boxing night of the modern era, the echo of her own choices is the loudest sound in her entire feed. It is the sound of a room that used to be full, emptying itself out one guest at a time, while the host keeps yelling from the balcony that the party has not ended. The party ended. The party moved. The party is at Madison Square Garden, and she is not on the guest list.